Hello and welcome to the Night Sky Reader. I'm here with a story to help you relax, meditate, or gently drift to sleep. Tonight, when the orchard hollow fills with fog, settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. Before anyone would call it fog, Orchard Hollow begins making it close to the ground, choosing places easy to overlook. The higher air still seems open and clear. The shape of the orchard can still be read from one end of the low valley to the other. Rows run in dim green bands. Tree crowns hold the last of the evening light. But down near the grass, where the land dips and keeps whatever coolness it can gather, the night is already doing finer work. Fog in Orchard Hollow does not arrive all at once. It starts in the small differences between stone and bark, rut and ridge, dry blade and wet one, as the hollow gives up the day by degrees. All afternoon the valley stored warmth without seeming to. The soil took some. So did the fieldstones edging the rows, and the packed turns where carts and tires have passed, and the trunks of the apple trees with their dark bark. Even the fruit, hanging quiet among leaves or lying in the grass below, kept a little of the sun behind its skin. Now the sun is gone from sight, and each surface returns its heat at its own pace. Evening is not one temperature laid evenly over the orchard. It is a patchwork. What lies low cools first. What is exposed cools differently from what is sheltered. What is thin gives up warmth sooner than what is dense. The change is calm, but it is not simple. The broad view does not tell enough. The eye that wants the finished picture too soon lowers itself from the tops of the rows to the spaces between them, from the open sky to ankle height. Orchard Hollow is shallow, but its shallowness matters. Cool air settles where the land receives it. The ditch lines along the edge of the orchard, hardly worth much notice in daylight, become useful now. They are narrow and slightly lower than the grass around them. Their blades are fine, their soil is a little darker. Evening reaches them first. There, along one shallow edge, the first change appears as a loss of darkness. The ditch grass no longer looks uniformly green or brown. Some blades have gone pale. Not bright, not white, only a little lighter than they were a few minutes before. Moisture begins to bead along their length, gathering so lightly that each thread of grass seems to hold a dull line of silver where the remaining light can catch. The ground beneath is cooling faster than the air above it, and the nearest air answers. Dampness begins to hold close. No bank of mist rises. Nothing drifts across the rows. Yet the mood of the orchard changes here first, in this slight paling at the edge. A few inches higher, the effect disappears. On the firmer ground beside the ditch, the grass still looks dry enough, darker and more separate, each tuft distinct. In the low strip itself, detail starts to soften. Fine seed heads wear tiny beads, the tips bend under the extra weight. A small spider thread stretched from one stem to another takes on moisture before it can be seen, then becomes visible only because it is wet. The ditch is not full of fog. It is simply becoming a place where damp can stay. A hurried glance would pass over it. A patient one begins to understand that the night is setting its first terms. Once the first pale edge shows, the hollow offers more to read. If the ditch can hold coolness, so can the wheel ruts between the orchard rows. They are not deep. Some are only shallow compressions left in the ground where repeated passing pressed the soil lower than the grass beside it. But that is enough. Their contour gives the cooling air a place to gather, and because they run straight ahead through the orchard, they make the process visible in lines. In one rut, the change declares itself more clearly. A thin ribbon of mist forms where the track dips a little and holds level for several yards. It lies low, no higher than a hand held flat over the ground, and it does not spread far beyond its channel. The ridge to either side remains dark and mostly clear. A silver line extends forward between the trees, not bright enough to shine, only distinct enough that the rut now looks filled with softer material than the earth around it. The night has begun to draw with contour. The ribbon does not hold evenly from end to end. Where the rut rises slightly, the mist thins. Where a patch of exposed soil kept more of the afternoon's warmth, the line breaks for a few feet and then reforms in the next shallow dip. This unevenness is honest. Fog forming in Orchard Hollow follows the shape of the land first, and the shape is never perfectly regular, even in rows planted by habit and measured by work. The orchard floor remembers every wheel turn, every slight settling of ground, every place where grass returned thicker or more sparse. Now those small histories guide the air. More ruts begin to answer. One lane near the lower end of the hollow gathers a fuller strip, pale enough to notice from several rows away. Another, closer to a patch of packed earth where turning happened often, stays mostly clear except at its far end. The farther ends of the lanes are easier to lose now. What once looked like simple perspective begins to shorten, distance grows gentler. The rows still run straight, but the eye meets softness sooner than before. At the row ends the first resistance appears. A low line of fieldstones, laid long ago simply to clear ground and mark edges, has not yet given up the day as quickly as the grass has. Each stone is darkening with evening, but not all in the same manner. Their shaded faces go cool first. Their upper surfaces, which held more sun, remain a little drier, a little less willing to invite damp. The grass beside them pales under a thin veil. The stones stand clear within it. Night in the hollow is made of separate negotiations. Moisture beads in the crevices before it shows on the open faces. A narrow seam between two stones darkens almost black, then turns faintly wet. Lichen on a north-facing edge catches damp sooner than the smoother top of the rock next to it. Along the base, where the grass leans against stone, a dim line of wetness gathers, but the stones keep a trace of stored warmth longer than the fine blades do. They delay the spread. A shallow patch of ground can whiten while the rock beside it still appears plainly itself. Around the stones, the first low mist folds and thins again. Damp settles into pits and roughness. Eventually, even the surfaces that held longest begin to yield. They lose the slight dry look that made them separate from the rest of the row edge. They start to belong to the same cool system as the grass. Once the stones accept the night, the level of softness rises. Until now, most of the change has stayed down in the grass and the ground channels. Now the bases of the apple trees begin to show it. The trunks darken from the bottom upward, not only because the light is falling, but because the air nearest the bark is wetter. Moisture clings where the trunk meets the earth. Root flare and fallen leaves hold coolness under the branches. The first foot of bark looks heavier in tone than the dry wood above it. The orchard divides into levels. Lower leaves lose their sharp edges first. A branch hanging close to the row lane remains easy to see at shoulder height, but the leaves nearest the grass seem to step half a pace back into gray. Their undersides no longer separate cleanly from the air around them. Higher branches still stand against the dim sky with their old crispness, each small cluster of apples readable as a darker shape among leaves. Below, the fog is not yet deep, but it has enough body to alter the orchard's structure. The trees now rise out of one condition into another. Near one trunk, a fallen apple lies in the grass where it dropped earlier and was left. One side, the side turned to the cooling ground, has gone wet first. It catches a dim shine that lasts only a moment when the last open light in the west reaches between two rows. Its skin smells faintly sharper now, the clean smell of apple flesh still enclosed, mixed with damp leaf and cooling soil. Then the low gray thickens around it, and the apple becomes less an object than a rounded patch of deeper color at the base of the tree. Sound changes with the levels. Crickets continue, but their sound is less pointed than it was at dusk. It no longer seems to come from clear, separate sources. The damp air wraps it, taking the edge off each pulse until the whole orchard carries a softer net of rhythm. A wing passes from one tree to the next. A small night bird calls from beyond the hollow, but distance is harder to measure now. The fog does not silence the orchard. It simply shortens the reach of every sound, as if the rows themselves have drawn closer together. By the middle of the evening, fog forming in Orchard Hollow can be followed row by row. What began in ditch grass and wheel ruts has enough steadiness now to gather in the open lanes. The rows become long, dim corridors with low gray standing between them. In some places, the fog reaches nearly to the lowest branches. In others, it still rests below the knees of the trunks, leaving a clearer band of air between bark and leaf. The hollow does not fill evenly. Slight rises still keep their edges. Patches of thicker grass cool faster than packed turns. The last differences continue to matter. One lane near the center settles early and fully, its floor covered in pale softness, so even it makes the track look shallower than it is. The lanes around it remain interrupted, some holding out near packed earth, some breaking where the ground lifts and firms a little. These last clear pockets are modest, but they hold whatever attention remains, not because they are dramatic, because they are the final exceptions in a system otherwise settling toward unity. A small gap persists beneath a row of lower branches where the ground is stonier. Another clings to the corner near a gatepost and a narrow rise. Clear is too strong a word for them now. They are only less softened than the lanes around them, small reserves of ordinary air held a few minutes longer. The farther ends of the rows fade first. Looking down any lane, the eye meets gray before it reaches the final tree. Trunks become a sequence rather than a count. The nearest are solid enough, dark columns sinking into mist. The next ones lose bark detail. Beyond them, the rows continue mostly by pattern, each tree suggested by the place it should be, then confirmed as a softened upright form. Above, the crowns remain separate against the deepening night. Below, the orchard floor is becoming one continuous atmosphere. The clear pockets thin not by motion but by surrender. Their edges stop resisting. What seemed to hold apart begins to resemble what surrounds it. A slight rise cools a little more. A packed turn ceases to give back its stored warmth. Moisture has more staying power than it did an hour ago. The fog no longer appears as isolated ribbons and strips. It links. One lane joins the next. The open spaces between the rows stop behaving like separate conditions and begin to act as one low basin receiving the same quiet air. The fieldstones that delayed things earlier are wet now from face to face. Their outlines remain, but they no longer interrupt the scene. The wheel ruts that first showed silver are no longer distinct channels because the ground beside them has caught up. The ditch grass at the orchard edge is almost indistinguishable from the rest of the low growth, except that it showed where to look first. Even the fallen apple beneath the tree has yielded its small shine. It rests in the same dim dampness as leaf, stem, and soil. Orchard Hollow has become one quiet room. Fog stands shoulder high between the rows in the lowest places, and a little lower on the gentle rises, enough to sink the trunks to their knees and soften the lower branches into gray. Above the fog line, apples and leaves still hang in darker clusters. Below it, grass, stones, ruts, and packed earth belong to a shared hush. The air smells cooler now than it did at dusk, though the difference is slight. Damp bark, bruised grass, faint apple skin, and the dark mineral smell of wetted stone meet without competing. Crickets continue under the softened air, less sharp than before. A sound from the far side of the valley reaches halfway and then seems to stop, not from any barrier, but because the night has become better at holding things close. The orchard is enclosed without being closed. Its limits are gentle, its stillness has room in it. And so the rows remain, fading gradually as they run into the fog. Lower trunks stand in it. Fieldstones rest dark and wet along the ends. Leaves near the ground blur into softness, while the higher ones wait in the dim, clear band above. If anyone were to look across the valley now, they would not see an event, only a condition fully arrived. Fog forming in Orchard Hollow has settled into every place it first chose. Ditch grass and wheel rut, stone face and root flare, and the whole orchard holds still inside it, pale, damp, and quietly complete. Thank you for spending this time with the Night Sky Reader. May your night be peaceful. Until next time, rest well.